What is up, everyone? This is Adam with the Lavin Real Estate Group and Next Home Synergy. And I'm here to answer a question today that I've been getting more frequently as interest rates have been rising in the first half of 2022. And that is, we live in Delaware County or Chester County, but basically in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And in this market, does it make more sense to buy a house, especially if it's our first time, or rent a house? So obviously, if you already own your house, moving from one house into another, typically it's a case-by-case scenario as to what makes the most financial sense for you and your family. So if you already own the house and you're building equity in the house, I would say 99% of the time it's smarter to at least keep the house that you're in as opposed to trying to sell it and then rent from there. And then in terms of moving from one house to another, whether you're moving up or down or making a similar trade and just moving areas, obviously, again, a case-by-case scenario. This is more for if you're buying a house for the first time in the area, what's the best thing to do right now in this market? And the answer is that it really depends. And so I've come up with a couple things here, and I'm going to kind of walk you through them, and hopefully one of them resonates for you. Obviously, I'm a real estate agent, and it's my job to sell homes and help people buy homes. But beyond that, it's also to help advise people and get you to understand where you're at and what the best move is for you, you and yourself and your family financially. So that you don't cripple yourself for the sake of, kind of an ego move of purchasing a home. So the first thing that you absolutely have to answer is how long you're going to live in the area or in that home. So if you're going to buy a house at whatever price range, and you're only going to be there probably for, a couple years, the margin of error for you actually losing money on that home because of fluctuations in the market and potential things that could go wrong with the home is pretty high. So in Delaware County and Chester County right now, our average price for a single family home is about $330,000. Now, depending on when you watch this, kind of goes up and down a little bit, but that's pretty much where we're at in the first half of 2022. A similar square footage, like a 2-bedroom apartment, that's nicer. For the most part, all in, you're probably somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 a month. Now, that includes a lot of things generally. It includes things like snow removal. Sometimes water is included. Electric and heat and things like that generally aren't included, so that's going to be separate. But there's security included, and you name it, a lot of amenities are included in that price when you're in that $2,000 to $2,500 per month category. So when you're purchasing the home, let's say it's in that $330,000 price range, if you're going to rent a similar style apartment that's going to give you the similar area space for you to live in and similar amenities, it's probably going to take about 3 to 4 years of just paying the home until you hit that crescendo and that crosshairs of, hey, it's actually better to own a home as opposed to rent the home. Now, the other thing to think about is what style of home are you looking at renting if you are going to rent? If you can rent in an apartment complex or a managed, standard managed apartment building or condo building, it's pretty much guaranteed that the landlords own that as a investment property, and they're going to keep renting forever. Now, there may be things like built-in increases in your rent every year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on what your lease looks like. Might be a little bit higher if you go month to month, but you can pretty much guarantee that you can move in there and you can stay there for an extended period of time, at least within, I'd say, the next 5 to 10 years. Now, if you try to rent a single family home off of somebody that it's kind of their second home that they're now renting out because they moved into a new home, That is where, it kind of, you get into this gray area that I would say, hey, maybe you need to worry about this idea, because one of the big costs that go into this is moving, obviously. Renting the truck and getting all your stuff packed and all the things that go along with that. I mean, it could be $1,000 to $2,000 there. Plus, generally, most of these places need a first month's rent and a last month's rent, security deposit. Now, obviously, if you're going to purchase a home, you're probably going to need to put a sizable down payment down on the house. So the amount of money that you're giving up at the, up front is kind of negligible. However, if you're renting a house from somebody that's a private landlord, let's call it, you don't really have the security of how long it's going to be before they decide to sell the home. And so they can, ruin your financial status by forcing you to move faster than you anticipated. And so that's something to worry about as well. So, if that's the style of house that you're going after and you have to, for whatever reason, live in a single family home and you're like, do I rent it? Do I buy it? In that scenario, usually it's just safer to attempt to buy the home as opposed to renting that style of home. But if you're able to live in like an apartment building or apartment complex or condo complex where you know that you're going to be able to rent for, let's say, 5 to 10 years, if need be, then that's generally the best way to go. Now, the next question is, if I know that I'm going to have to move within, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years, do you know where you're going to have to move? Because if you are going to be able to live close by and you just know that the reason that you're going to probably have to move is that, you're going to move in and, maybe you have a dog or you don't, but you're going to move in, maybe, you and your significant other are starting your relationship, and seeing where life takes you, but in the next several years you're probably going to want to start a family. If that's the reason that you're going to stay in a rental type situation, build up some equity for yourself, or build up some savings for yourself, and then potentially purchase a home nearby, then there is the possibility that if you have the funds to do it, it's a smarter idea to purchase the home. And the reason why is because one of the best investments you can possibly ever make is real estate. Over the last 50 years, it just keeps going up and up and up. And over the last 2 or 3 years, it's gone up at such an exponential rate that it's beaten out every other market, short of perhaps, cryptocurrency. But even so, it's been the safest. It just goes up and up and up. And so, if you're able to live in the area and sort of act as a local landlord and just rent it out to somebody that you'll be able to make a great investment where if you started to rent it out, you're probably going to make more than what you're actually paying for the mortgage. You could pocket that money or reinvest it, and then also you're still building equity in that house that you can ultimately sell one day. Now, if you don't know where you're going to live, or move, but that you work for, one of these bigger corporations that usually require a move like every 2 to 3 years for the first, 10 to 15 years until you build up a foundation within the company and they sort of settle you down somewhere, and that's the path that you're on, then, purchasing a home and you're going to have to move within 3 to 5 years, while it might be, a great thing to do for yourself and for your ego, it's probably not the greatest thing to do financially, just because the market can fluctuate in that small of a time. You don't know how fast you can get out of the house. Right now we are in the advantage of being in a seller's market, but things can shift, and just not that long ago we had houses sitting on the market for at least a month, if not 6 months to a year in some scenarios. So if you need to get out of it and you're not going to be able to afford to foot the mortgage of a second house and, worry about a home, several states away from where you live, then that's just something to keep in mind. And in that scenario, it's probably not the greatest idea to purchase a home right away until you kind of know your whereabouts. And the last thing to really think about is if you're purchasing your first home, if you know you're going to stay there for a while, even if you have to move up in style of house and you're able to live nearby, and this is where you grew up and this is where you're going to stay and your job's here, and you have a pretty good idea that you're not moving for a while, you still kind of want to think about, how much money do you have in savings? For the most part in this market, you can kind of get away with getting a mortgage with 5% down. That being said, there are, in order to win the bid on a house right now, there's a lot of people doing things like paying the appraisal gap, which means that they're paying even more money out of pocket to solidify the house and get the contract. And ultimately, if you're going to live in the house for an extended period of time, it is almost guaranteed that the market is always going to continue to rise over an extended period of time. So over the 30 years that your mortgage will probably be, it should be higher. Nothing's guaranteed, obviously, in the investment world, but it should be higher when you go to sell your house in 30 years and the mortgage is paid off. But up front, the real question is like, okay, great. You have the 5% to put down on a house if you're going to go conventional mortgage. And closing costs in Pennsylvania right now are about 6%. So let's say you have 10 to 11% total to put down on the house and pay for your closing costs and do that whole thing. Maybe a little bit more even if you need to pay any sort of gap that's occurring in the appraisal that's going on in the market right now. What you don't want to do to yourself is be what we would call house poor. And I just don't like to see that happen to anybody, because what it potentially happens is that you buy the house and all of a sudden, if you didn't work with a great agent or you weren't able to get an inspection for whatever reason, something goes wrong with the house. You need a new roof, or the driveway needs to get redone. You need to buy washers and dryers and furniture for the entire house, and all sorts of things can happen over the first 3 to 5 years of owning a home. And none of it's cheap. None of it's cheap by any means. So what you don't want to do is get yourself in the scenario where it's like, hey, we got the house and now we can't put anything in it, or we can't afford to take care of it. And if you're not able to take care of it, ultimately, long term, you're not going to get as much money back if the house isn't well maintained. So that's something to think about as well, is, would it be maybe smarter to take the next 2 to 3 years to sit back? The market's going to always do what it's going to do. There's never really a bad time to get into it, because if you're going to own the house for the long run, there's more than likely the possibility that the market's going to continue to go up. And you're going to make money in the long run by making that investment and growing equity in that home, whether you rent it out or just live there and then ultimately sell it. But in the short term, you don't want to put yourself in a bad financial scenario for yourself or your family, where you can't take care of the home, or you have to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, when really you could have just waited and taken your time and done something that's maybe a little bit more, more intelligent financially speaking for yourself. So if you're just starting to think about purchasing your first home and you're not really sure exactly how much everything costs or what's all involved, or even how much everything costs inside the home that you might have to worry about, or as you're going from house to house, you're like, you don't know how much anything's going to cost, or different things in different houses. I'd love to get a chance to work with you and talk to you. Obviously, based on this conversation, you realize I'm not pushing anybody to purchase a home, but certainly if you are ready to do that, I'd love to advise you on it. You can feel free to give me a call at any time or text me. My number is 610-442-9371, or you can email me at the email below. And that is it. I appreciate you so much for watching today. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.